Hi everyone, it's pre-edit Ivy. Post-edit Ivy is going to come to you in just a second, but pre-edit Ivy wants to let you know, first of all, thank you for joining Georgetown SPJ for another one of these Journal Talks videos. Today we brought on Kristi and Evelyn from Kaftan TV's Live in Washington to have a conversation about not just what it looks like to do international journalism, but what it looks like to work together. How do you become a part of a team atmosphere as they have producing their show? They've done a lot of great interviews. They're both actually not from the Georgetown SCS, Masters in Journalism program, but from our Communications, Culture, and Technology program in the graduate school on Georgetown's main campus. So a lot of different things to get through. One of the things that I want to preface with is obviously you will not see my physical face. We had a little bit of trouble with this particular recording because of a lot of just extenuating circumstances. However, like journalists, like people who are in motion, we make things work. So this conversation will have mostly their interview at the start, and then we'll get into a little bit more of the interview, and I will hop on at about the halfway point to ask some questions and really get into the depths of some questions that you all had. Aside from all that, thank you so much for sticking with this channel. And we are sending good vibes and wishing good health on a lot of not just people in Georgetown, but people in our Georgetown orbit in SPJ and around the world as they're dealing with coronavirus and various other health things. We want to make sure that we are being considerate of each other, and I'm very glad that our guests today were very considerate of me and of our schedules as SPJ began to juggle just a couple of different things internally. So without further ado, Kristi and Evelyn, thank you for taking the time. Please start off with just telling us who you are and what you're about.
I'm Kristi Pelzel. I just graduated from Georgetown's Communication, Culture, Technology program in May. And upon graduation, I had many ambitions, but communication, journalism, storytelling was all within my wheelhouse. And during my time at Georgetown, I met a wonderful peer named Evelyn Dan Epelle. And she introduced me to a Nigerian news station called Kaftan TV. And so after graduated, I found a home there, and I get lots of support from Evelyn, who also works with Kaftan. And that's what I'm currently doing as US correspondent for Kaftan TV, participating in international journalism and foreign affairs and foreign analysis.
Hi guys, so my name is Evelyn Dan Epelle. I'm from Nigeria. I have worked as a multimedia journalist and communication strategist for Kaftan TV Nigeria. Kaftan stands for King Adebayo Film and Theatre Arts Network. It's a TV station that started out in Ondo State in Nigeria and now has branched out to Lagos, Abuja, and we have recently reached out to other parts of the world as well. Before Georgetown, I pretty much was working as, just in the intersection of communications. And then when I got to Georgetown, I started to craft a pathway in journalism and digital media through the CCT program, where I met Kristi. One of the things that I found at the CCT program is just how the interdisciplinary program kind of brings together people from different backgrounds. So you can find doctors in the program, you can find lawyers, you can find every kind of discipline. And so it's pretty much a place to grow and build on your ideas. And Kristi was kind of receptive of me and my culture and my style. And we started out as friends and we started to share ideas. I found that for every idea that I had, she was able to draw from it, expand it, build on it. And that's pretty much how we started a working relationship. And then she also started writing so much. And, I was like, hey, why don't you start writing more journalistic pieces? And she kind of made that switch from more communications consulting into journalism. So it's pretty much been a growth process for the both of us. And it's been fantastic.
Right. And I think that international journalists in various programs, not just at Georgetown, but across the spectrum, can benefit from having that type of mentality. I think that especially you can see it in the way some studies and statistics come out on on specifically Western forms of journalism. We are very good at forcing our journalists to become pillars of knowledge rather than people who are working together in a collaborative effort that are, abiding in these communities of practice, that are really doing the work that they should be doing together to really formulate knowledge. With that in mind, I want to highlight and give you guys a chance, and maybe I'll start with Evelyn this time around and move to Kristi. There is a question that journalists have just by and large about the major differences between various types of journalism. And one of the top differences that people normally point out is it feels like there's a more academic pull when it comes to international journalism. You guys are reading not just your sources, but y'all are reading daily columns that maybe say, oh, well, these 4 articles, all of them in the whatever journal of science, math, whatever. You guys are reading like deep, very, very impactful sources. Yeah. Our journalists do that, but we are not pulled towards academia. Do you all see that difference? And how do you mitigate that when you're talking about Washington, and maybe Washington isn't talking about these studies, and Washington isn't talking about all of these topics to the same degree that maybe you all are seeing it?
This is a very brilliant question, because last week I had an argument about this same thing. And I said to someone, the summary of everything is context is key. Context is key. Context is key. And because we are in a research institution, like you rightly said, we have access to researched knowledge. So it's not just some random flying idea. These are ideas that have been researched. And so we pick that research idea and go back on the field and compare that to, just street knowledge, and combine the both of them in some kind of synthesis. And it happens through conversations, and I really think that there's so much that the academic environment can give to journalists in terms of access to data. And I'm personally working on that right now in Nigeria in terms of putting together a digital library specifically for journalists to have access to researched, data and researched knowledge. Here in the US, I really must say that, the United States has been very generous when it comes to sharing data and sharing knowledge, as opposed to even back home in Nigeria. And, that's something that we can really tap into. That's what I really think, that being in a research institution is pretty much the goal. That's like our holy grail, because we're here. And I feel like there should be more open access to data so that journalists outside of the research institutions or outside of academia can have access to that data as well.
And I'll add to what Evelyn said. Another thing that why we have branched out so much in the resources that we're looking at to come up with these articles and analysis is because we're very aware of the era of fake news. And when we read articles, we really have to read articles and see who the article quoted and who that article was quoted. And when you dig through all of the quotes till you get to the final person who originally quoted something, if you can ever find that, then you have to decipher whether or not that's a trusted source or not, based on, reputation. And so we will look at things that are put out across social media. We will look at articles that are put out from Reuters and different news publications, but then we also try to match that with studies, with organizations like the UN, people who've been in the field and they've made observations, and they have these more in-depth studies. So that's another reason to try to dig deeper into sources, is because we are in a political era, and we are in an era where news, just as it's regurgitated down the line, gets twisted. And so we just try to be so careful of that.
Yeah, that just reminds me of, that conversation we had yesterday about the equity situation. And I always say that fact checking is very important. And I say things like, oh, the news story said, that this will happen. This hasn't happened. So we can't report this situation as though it has happened because we do not. And I said to her, oh, we need to go find the white paper, like stamp, seal that this has happened. Because before we report that this has happened, we have to be sure for ourselves that this has happened and not because some famous person reported it to have happened. So yeah, fact checking.
No, I was just going to say that that's like the most common phrase. And I wanted to give you guys a little bit more time maybe to investigate that, because I think that journalists, especially at Georgetown, but who are going to work for, national organizations, need to be able to ask themselves these questions. Do you all think, I guess a good question is for fact checking in the United States. Do you think that we should take up more of those things, more of those ideas, more of those identifying qualities of journalism outside of the United States when it comes to digging through the documents, looking for the white papers and looking for the things that make make it fact? Do you think that we're doing that at the level that we should, Evelyn? Then Kristi?
We're not doing that at the level that we should, because if we are, we wouldn't be here. It's interesting that, when it comes to fact checking, so I want to backtrack a little bit to my background. My background is in electronics and communications engineering. That's what I studied for my first degree at All Nations University in Ghana, before I made this switch into communications, culture, and technology, and now crafting a pathway in journalism and digital media. And so while I was in undergrad studying engineering, I came across this concept called color coding. And color coding in engineering is, if you pick up a piece of wire and you see each wire has a cable, and each of that each color represents a resistant value. And so one time, especially when the first presidential debate went on and the issue of fact checking came up, I had this really random epiphany, and I was saying to myself that perhaps we need to look into the use of technology for fact checking. I really have not refined this idea, so please don't quote me, but I'm looking into changing information and communication technology in such a way that technology can do the fact checking to the point that we can color code the internet. I know it sounds very vague, it sounds very random, but think about a news page where, say, fake news is highlighted in some certain color, and then that when this turns red, it's fake news, and when it's black, it's real news. I really don't know how we're going to balance that, but I really know that the concept of color coding exists, and we can literally code the internet, right? Because fake news is pretty much a pandemic. Fake news is pretty much a pandemic. It's huge right now. And one of the biggest challenges that I have is discerning truths. So before we publish any story, before we hit publish on any story, we have to make sure that word for word, line by line, fact for fact, it's the truth. And truth is relative because we have personal truths, we have objective truths, we have political truths. There's sometimes Kristi wants to, say something, and I know that this is true, but I'm a patriotic Nigerian citizen, and what she's saying is about to take a jab at my country, and I'm like, am I going to let a US citizen say this about Nigeria? But then I have to find that balance to be like, okay, what she's saying, is it true or false? And it's like, it's true. So go ahead and publish your story because, my personal truth, because I'm a patriotic Nigerian citizen, should not stop you from being an objective journalist. So just allowing ourselves to let the truth flow, because sometimes people use their personal disposition to block the truth. And it's like, that this is the truth, but because it's personal, you don't let it fly, you just let it hang. So I think that there's so much technology can do for us. I'm still researching that. I haven't gotten to how we can color code the internet, but that's something we should definitely look into doing, the use of technology for fact checking.
So I want to bend the question for Kristi now, because I know that I could maybe get a little bit of an interesting angle on this. Kristi, Evelyn has a really good perspective here, but I also recognize how deep you are into, how much experience you've had, not just with the United Nations, both of you, but with an Americanized sense of politicking. There are so many moments where I think about the NBC, CNN, ABCs of the world, who recognize that objective truth in the United States is something that is not necessarily going out of style. That's a strong statement, but it's up for grabs, and it makes doing that work difficult. Do you see some of Evelyn's point that maybe we should be doing this a little bit more aggressively and color coding and making sure that we're outlining things, or are you seeing a little bit of a different spin on this? I'm wondering what your angle is.
Well, Evelyn is very, very thorough and very serious about, not wanting to have something come back on her. And I don't think any journalist wants something to come back on them and said that they have misrepresented the truth. That could end their career quite quickly. One issue is that if you look at journalism today, especially in the United States, people don't have journalists who are sitting at their desks trying to cover their beats have less and less time and more tasks on their plate that they must complete, and they must churn out a certain amount of content, and they must move very quickly. And it's very difficult. Evelyn and I have a very liberal time schedule as far as getting our content out. We have a goal, but if we take extra time with our content to do more research and go in deeper, we're okay. But I know that there's a lot of hustle bustle, mainstream US newsrooms that do not have that flexibility. So when these journalists sit down and they have a deadline for something, they need to get a certain amount of content out. They're going through things, but if you can't look at things in the depth that we do, you're going to miss some things. You're going to misquote. You're going to report fake news, and it's just going to happen. Evelyn was discussing, something that she and I were working on, and there was one word in there, and that one word was the difference between something that had happened and had not happened. One word. And so I read it one way, she read it the correct way. But that's why we work together. And
am I being so aggressive?
No, but that's why we work together. If I worked in a vacuum and I got really offensive and I said, you know what, I don't want you checking any of my work. I'm not going to show you what I'm working on. I want my content printed, I wouldn't have grown the way I've grown to this point, and been able to really embrace some good practices here. But there are many agencies, government agencies, private agencies working right now on how do we do what Evelyn is talking about? How do we innovate a way forward to tag fake news? How do we stop fake news? They're working on that. They haven't figured it out. We haven't figured it out. And there's some really sophisticated methods of lacing in ideas throughout what we think is trusted news. And that gets picked up and returned out all the time. It just happens. It's inevitable. As long as we're on the deadlines that we're on, as long as we're on the time frames from a US standpoint, it's going to happen. It's inevitable. And all we can do is, do the best we can and really try to, if you can't look at academia and research studies and cross-reference dozens of other articles to make sure a fact is true, at least my advice is to read what you're reading word for word and really read what they're telling you. And then from that, you can kind of intuitively say, wait a minute, that doesn't sound right. Use your gut feeling to see if what you're reading sounds right based on the knowledge around that subject of other things you've been reading. But right now, we don't have a tried and true way to stop fake news from being regurgitated in the news.
Right.
And we're going to get lots of apologies printed from now for the next year or whatever until we figure this thing out. But every country has this issue. Nigeria has this issue with political parties lacing in different ideas in the news. We have this issue. Colombia has this issue. Everyone has this issue. And the more digitally connected we become and the more access to the internet people get, the more bloggers we have and the more open we become with sharing information on the internet, the more ideas are going to be thrown out there and they're going to get picked up and they're going to go different places. And that's just the world we're living in now.
Well, I hear that. I don't want to get us too far off track. I know I have you all over anyway. For everyone's edification, these two lovely people stayed with me when they did not need to amongst an emergency that just came out of nowhere. I am thankful for the both of them, but I'm going to get their questions in. I also want to note, while I have you and while I have your attention, while we are in my room, I want to make sure that I let you know that we'll be bringing these questions, this exact question actually, to two ethics professors over in the School of Continuing Studies, as well as some other professionals, to ask how journalists should be dealing with this. And we want to make sure that you know that, so that you can be on SPJ's channel and looking at the National SPJ chapter, for which, hint, hint, one of our speakers is actually from that organization and worked on their ethical code in the past couple of years. So you will want to watch that. For you two, before I go, Kristi and then Evelyn, I need to ask you, so many students, not just in SES, not just in SPJ Georgetown, but across the country are wanting to do this type of national coverage. You both are a special tag team, just to read about and to see how you guys came together and how you're now creating Live in Washington. It's, you know, there's just so much between the two of you that I know that our students are going to want to know.
We're not going to tell you the secret.
Yeah, please give me the secret sauce. Like, that's all I'm saying. They want to know, what is your tip? What is your tip for jumping into this part of the industry, getting these types of connections made? What is that secret sauce? I want to know. KFC recipe.
Kristi, you want to go?
Sure. I just, for students who are, early in their career and they want to jump in here, do not be that person in the classroom that sits in the same desk and doesn't talk to anybody. You have to talk to people, move your chair around, know everyone in the room, network with your professors, everyone in there. You have no idea where any of those connections could lead. So completely open your mind, sit with every group of people in that room at some point in the classroom, and expose yourself. So expose yourself by writing blog posts, letting people know what type of information you're interested in, and just working with your peers and working with the professor in ways that will let people know about what you're interested in and seeing what opportunities you might be able to collaborate with people on. If I had utilized my time in Georgetown to just go to class and run out the door, some people do that. That's, maybe people who already have a career job, lined up. But if you're looking to get into journalism, journalism is all about networking. You've got to build your networks like a web across all types of people, all types of places. If I'm looking at West Africa right now, West African journalists, well, who are the people I need to know? Probably West African people who are working at West African think tanks, people who work at the State Department. So these are all people I seek out and I make sure that I get to know and try to collaborate on projects with. So the secret sauce is networking. And if you are a journalist student, get in your classrooms and treat it like a big networking session. Do not sit by yourself. Do not sit in the same place and talk to the same people. Move around, get to know the professor, value everyone.
Yes, Kristi snatched that out. But, I want to speak of a more holistic approach to what I think is our secret sauce. So if you had walked into the CCT lounge on, when Kristi and I were there, now she's graduated and I graduated in December, and you say who are the most unlikely to be friends, it definitely would be Kristi and Evelyn. And, yeah, because it's like, we never even did we take any class together? We never took a class together and things like that. But one of the things I find that really got us to connect, because some people have used that word to describe us, people say things like yin yang, is vulnerability. For you to successfully collaborate with anyone, you have to recognize what your strengths are and use that same energy to recognize what your weaknesses are. And once you recognize what your weaknesses are, you have to share those weaknesses with your partner. This is like a marriage. I'm not even joking. This is like a marriage. Like, you literally have to share those weaknesses And the reason you're sharing those weaknesses is not because your partner is going to judge you, but it's because they would be able to put that into their own, find ways to accommodate that, and not just accommodate it because they want you to remain weak, but help you to grow. So for example, I'm going to give you a practical example. I'm Nigerian. I grew up in Nigeria. And in Nigeria, it's somewhat socially acceptable to show up to a 1 p.m. event at 4 p.m. If you tell me your wedding starts at 1 p.m., I probably would show up at 4 p.m. It's like, so showing up late to things, I before now, I didn't even see that as disrespectful, or I didn't see that as a problem. So I literally walked into the room with that. And Kristi, you remember our very first ever, work that we had to do together. She literally kept waiting, and she's like, where is Evelyn? Where's Evelyn? And she was just waiting. And one day we had this really intense conversation about, why do you have to show up late all the time? And then I wanted to pin this on, oh, I'm Nigerian. And she said, what about being Nigerian makes you show up late? And that was a very brilliant question. And it helped me to reflect that this has got nothing to do with Nigeria. This is because as an individual, I haven't become time conscious. And so she started to make adjustments. She would call me 10 minutes before the event and like, are you ready? And, I started working on that. And look who showed up first today. Look who was the first one to show up today.
You were. But sometimes I will go over to her house and I'll say, all right, let's go. And she'll go, okay, I'm going to get in the shower. And I'm like, no, let's go.
I love that.
I'm growing, but it's like, until you allow yourself to be that vulnerable that you can share your weaknesses so that your partner kind of helps you to grow and kind of, uses her strength, because this is an American citizen who shows up at 12 when it's 12. So it's like, you have to measure up to that as well. You know what I mean? And so she also has, I'm not going to drag you, Kristi. I'm not going to do that.
You already are. It's okay.
Okay, I'm not going to drag you. 1-0. I'm not going to drag you. She also has her weaknesses. And I kind of like sprinkle some salt on that, and make it really cute. And, it turns out to be this one happy family. And she's never judging me. I remember when we did an interview with the UNGA president in New York, and Kristi had to keep saying her lines over. This is not a drag, but she had to keep saying her line over and over again. And she was concerned about whether or not she was offending me. And she's like, oh, and I'm like, no, this is what, you're not making a mistake. This is what you're supposed to be doing. It's like, I can't judge you for not getting stuff right. You know what I mean? It's like, you have to allow your partner to be themselves. So it's, if you're collaborating, you're not judging people. And one other thing that Kristi does that's really spectacular is she makes sure that we celebrate all the time. Kristi celebrates everything. Kristi would celebrate because it's noon. Kristi would celebrate because it's Monday. She celebrates every single thing. And, I think that concept of celebration just kind of makes everything beautiful, because now you're not focusing on what you did wrong, but then you're even magnifying the very little things that you got right. So I think that's for me personally, it's about being vulnerable. She's allowed me to be vulnerable so that she can help me work on my strengths or my weaknesses while I help her work on hers. And then I think that even makes it twice as powerful. And also celebrating one another. We celebrate each other a lot, and, using positive.
Sometimes more than we work.
If we have 1 hour working together, we probably will spend 15 minutes celebrating each other, like, go girl.
Well, I love that. And I'm not gonna lie, I love when I get to see it on like Instagram and stuff, which, by the way, if you're watching this, you can watch both of these wonderful people on Compton TV. You have no reason not to. They are literally digitally available right at this moment. You can read all of their writings. There will be links in the description of this video, but as for right now, Kristi, Evelyn, thank you. And of course, I am now gonna toss it back to Ivy, who is editing this. Ivy, please take it away.
Yay.
All right, and that was our conversation with Kristi and Evelyn. I just want to thank all of them again for being patient. Again, post-edit Ivy is a different entity than pre-edit Ivy, but Very, very thankful for their time, their patience, and your patience. Please continue to keep with the Georgetown SPJ channel. You can always follow our social media below. And of course, please feel free to like and comment and share as much as you want. We want to make sure that everyone has access to great conversations like this one. And even though it went a little bit longer than most of our normal conversations do, we're very thankful for the time that they gave us. And we're very thankful for the experience that we got of having two stellar journalists, two stellar communications experts, and international icons from Georgetown's wonderful aura in our presence. Thank you. I am Ivy. This is Georgetown SPJ. And as always, Hoya Saxa, friends.